Good evening, everyone. Yesterday in our class, we were discussing about the gray matter. Today, we'll start with the white matter. So, we are going to talk about the white matter, the structure, and its function. So, basically, whenever we talk about white matter, you have to remember about the myelinated axons. Okay, myelinated axons, as well as we have a lot many tracts. Okay, what are tracts? I have already mentioned yesterday that the bundle of axons which are present in the central nervous system, that is what we call to be the tracts. Now, all these tracts are present, okay, in the white matter. Okay, what is present in the gray matter? The lamina of Rex, what we had discussed in the last class. So today we will be talking about the tracts. So talking about the tracts, always remember that we have an ascending tract as well as descending tract, right? So as you can see over here, we have ascending tract as well as descending tract. The ascending tract actually takes the sensory information, whereas the descending tract takes the motor information. Okay, now that is important. So ascending tract takes sensory information and the descending tract takes motor information. Now let us see what are the tracts and what are the descending tracts as well as the ascending tracts. So talking about the descending tract, this is a little more simpler image on your screen. So descending tracts, we have a white column or lateral white column. Okay, we have a lateral white column in which we have two kind of tracts. One is the lateral corticospinal tract, okay, lateral corticospinal tract, as well as we have a rubrospinal tract. Okay, you can see rubrospinal tract. So in the lateral corticospinal tract, you can see that it is written SLTC, right? So that simply means the region of affection. That is, region is sacral, lumbar, thoracic, and cervical. Okay, sacral, lumbar, thoracic, and cervical. Fine. So that is about the two lateral white column descending motor tracts. Apart from that, we can see the ventral white column tracts. So nothing is there in the upper part, right? Now we'll see. In the lateral column is done. Let us see the ventral column. In the ventral column, we have a lateral reticulospinal tract, plus we have a medial reticulospinal tract, a vestibulospinal tract, a tectospinal tract, as well as an anterior corticospinal tract. Okay, now we'll see the functions of these in detail. But for now, remember these are the descending motor tracts. So what are the descending motor tracts? Namely, a lateral corticospinal tract as well as a rubrospinal tract, which is found in the lateral white column. Okay, lateral white column. Next one, we have a lateral reticulospinal tract, a medial reticulospinal tract, vestibulospinal tract, tectospinal tract, as well as an anterior corticospinal tract in the ventral white column. Okay, these are the names of the descending motor tracts. Okay, now coming to the ascending sensory tracts. Okay, ascending sensory tract, I have already mentioned, right? Descending is for motor information and ascending is for sensory information. So let us see the ascending motor tracts. Now over here, see, just the opposite of the descending tract, we do have a dorsal white column, right? So in the dorsal white column, remember, we have two nucleuses. Okay, two nucleuses that are present in the dorsal white column. Okay, now let us see what are the nucleuses. They are fasciculus gracilis as well as we have the fasciculus cuneatus. Basically, now these two, when it comes together, the pathway we call it to be a dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway. Okay, let's just write it down for you. We call it to be a medial lemniscus pathway. Okay, medial lemniscus pathway, wherein they are concerned with discriminative touch, that is 2 point, as well as the proprioception, that is knowing the position of the body. Okay, and not many receptors are actually helping them. The Meissner's corpuscle, which we had mentioned yesterday, the Merkel's disc, the Pacinian corpuscle, the Ruffini's corpuscle, as well as the peritracheal nerve endings. These are the ones. Now, what is the difference between, like, if I mentioned that under the dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway, both these nucleuses are present, right? Now, the difference between these two nucleuses is that one starts from yeah, So one starts from below the T6 and above, and the other one starts from above the T6. Okay, that is the just difference. Now I'll just mention in the upcoming slides about it. Now for now, please remember we have a fasciculus gracilis as well as fasciculus cuneatus. Okay. Now apart from that, the other ascending tracts are the dorsal spinocerebellar tract, the ventral spinocerebellar tract, the lateral spinocerebellar tract, as well as the spino-olivary tract. Now all these are found on the lateral column. Okay, these are found in the lateral white column. So remember, in the dorsal white column we have two, that is fasciculus gracilis and the fasciculus cuneatus, which are a part of a medial lemniscus pathway. Okay, in the lateral white column we have a dorsal spinocerebellar tract, a lateral spinocerebellar tract, a ventral spinocerebellar tract, as well as a spino-olivary tract. Okay, but in the ventral side we have only one, that is a anterior spinothalamic tract, otherwise we can call it to be a ventral spinothalamic tract. So these are the names which you have to remember. You have to remember which are the ones that come under a descending tract, as well as which are the ones that come in the ascending tract. Okay. Next one, let us see the functions. So talking about the function, let us see about the spinothalamic tract. Talking about the spinothalamic tract, we have the lateral spinothalamic tract as well as the anterior spinothalamic tract. Correct? So talking about it, remember the function of a lateral spinothalamic tract is basically pain and function, or pain and temperature. Okay, pain and temperature is what our lateral spinothalamic tract is dealing with. Coming to the anterior spinothalamic tract, okay, that is crude touch and pressure. Okay, crude touch and pressure. Remember that we are talking about the ascending tracts right now. Okay, next one, talking about the dorsal column, that is fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. As mentioned, here is the difference. See, fasciculus gracilis, it actually starts from the T6 and below, whereas the fasciculus cuneatus, it starts from the T5 and above. Okay, T5 and above. And remember, these both I have already mentioned, that is fine touch, proprioception, 2-point discrimination, as well as vibrations. These are the functions of a fasciculus gracilis as well as fasciculus cuneatus. If you remember, what was the name of the pathway? That is medial lemniscus pathway. Okay, medial lemniscus pathway. Next one, talking about the spinocerebellar tract. So talking about spinocerebellar tract, how many spinocerebellar tract we do have? We have an anterior spinocerebellar tract, otherwise called to be the ventral spinocerebellar tract, as well as we have a posterior spinocerebellar tract, otherwise you can call it to be a dorso-spinocerebellar tract, right? So both of them is dealing with or deals with the movement and the position mechanism, basically the proprioception. Okay, and lastly we have a spino-olivary tract. Okay, if you remember, spino-olivary tract is here. Okay, now that deals with basically whatever informations are there, they convey to the cerebellum. Okay, from the cutaneous and the proprioceptive organs. So from the proprioceptive as well as the cutaneous organs, they are going to convey the information, or they'll take the information from there and they'll give it away to the cerebellum. Okay, cerebellum. These are the function of the ascending tracts. Now coming to the descending tract. Okay, talking about the descending tracts over here, we have a lateral corticospinal tract. See, lateral corticospinal tract was there in the lateral column, right? So basically we had mentioned, right, we have SLTC. So SLTC means what? Sacral, lumbar, thoracic, as well as cervical. So remember, the functions are it takes care of the voluntary control of the skeletal muscle. See, the ascending tracts is basically sensory information, right? So we did not even talk about any motor functions. But in case of a lateral corticospinal tract, coming to the descending one, we have motor functions. Okay, so over here we have voluntary control of skeletal muscle. It stimulates the lower motor neurons, as well as it helps in the fine motor function and modulation of the sensory functions. Next one, about the anterior corticospinal tract. Okay, anterior corticospinal tract. Now over here, if you remember the structure, here we had exactly the anterior corticospinal tract. So talking about it, remember that it helps in the gross as well as postural motor function. Okay, basically the proximal and the axial musculature, whatever are there, of those musculature, the gross and postural motor function is what our anterior corticospinal tract is dealing with. Coming to the rubrospinal tract. Rubrospinal tract, remember that was in the lateral column, right? So, rubrospinal tract, it deals with the motor function, and also it facilitates the activity of the flexor muscles. And remember, when there is, it can, or else you can, in short, you can say that it helps in the inhibiting the anti-gravity muscles. Okay, activity of the extensors. It inhibits the activity of extensors, or else you can say, or the anti-gravity muscles. Okay, extensors or the anti-gravity muscle. Just remember rubrospinal tract. Anything regarding the anti-gravity, always remember the rubrospinal tract. Okay. Next one, talking about the vestibulospinal tract, which is in the ventral column. Okay. So vestibulospinal tract, postural reflexes. Then it helps in the postural reflexes, facilitates the activity of extensor muscles and inhibits the activity of flexor muscles, and that too in association with maintenance of balance. So vestibulospinal tract, okay, remember all the activity of the extensor muscles. So if you remember, if you have understood, the rubrospinal tract as well as the vestibulospinal tract is entirely opposite. See, in rubrospinal tract, they are going to facilitate the activity of flexor muscle and inhibit the extensors. But in case of a vestibulospinal tract, they are going to facilitate the activity of extensor and inhibit the flexor muscles. Okay, and that is something which you have to remember. Coming to the reticulospinal tract. See, reticulospinal tract, actually we have lateral, we have medullary, that is flexors, and medial we have that basically the pontine centers, which helps in the, or which is dealing with the extensors. Okay, so remember that the reticulospinal tract, they are divided into two. One is a lateral reticulospinal tract and the other one is a medial reticulospinal tract. Lateral reticulospinal tract deals with the medullary function, that is the main core function is to the flexors, whereas the medial reticulospinal tract, the center is the pons or pontine center, and remember the function is towards the extensors. Okay, so whatever modulation of sensory information or sensory transmission is there, then spinal reflexes, as well as any influence it influences voluntary movements as well as reflex activity. All those are dealt with a reticulospinal tract, may it be a lateral one or the medial one. Okay, lastly, let us see about the tectospinal tract. Okay, see, tectospinal tract basically deals with the head turning. It reflects the turning of the head. Okay, and concerned with the reflex postural movement, that too in response to a visual stimuli. See, suddenly visual stimuli, we try to tend to move our posture, right, according to it. Okay, all those are being dealt with the help of a tectospinal tract. So these are basically the functions of our ascending as well as descending tract. Okay, just remember this much. So next one, let us see a little about the skeletal muscle fiber. So talking about the skeletal muscle fiber, this is important to know about the stretch reflex in the spinal cord. Okay, or else you can call it to be a muscle spindle reflex. Okay, muscle spindle reflex. Basically, in a skeletal muscle, there are two kind of muscles. Okay, we have two kind. One is known as a extrafusal muscle. The other one is known as a intrafusal muscle. Okay, extrafusal, the one which is striated one over here, these are the extrafusal, and the one which is in blue color, they are the intrafusal muscles. Okay, see, extrafusal muscle is the abundant one and it makes up most of the skeletal muscle. Okay, and the extrafusal ones are the ones which are going to attach to a bone. Okay, attached to a tendon, and the tendon is attached to the bone. And the extrafusal muscle, they generate movement. Okay, they generate movement. Probably we can say that they are used to generate force. Okay, so whenever an extrafusal muscle is being pulled, okay, or whenever it is contracted, okay, they pull the tendon which pulls the bone, and that is why the movement happens over there. Okay, and one of the important thing, they are innervated by, okay, extrafusal muscles, they are innervated by alpha motor neurons. Okay, alpha motor neurons, important. Next one is about the intrafusal muscle. See, intrafusal muscle, as written over here, it is innervated by gamma motor neurons. They actually, basically, they are covered by a connective tissue. You can see the ones which are striated and brown in color. I have mentioned that it is extrafusal muscle, right? The ones which are there, you can see a bulb over here. Okay, and then a little striation and lot many dots over here. These are what you can say the intrafusal muscle. Okay, intrafusal muscle. And the one which is in green color over here, the one which is in between the extrafusal and the intrafusal, that is a connective tissue. Okay, connective tissue. So basically, an intrafusal muscle will be covered by a connective tissue capsule. Okay, and these intrafusal muscles, basically they are specialized fibers. They have proprioceptors position identification, right? And they are encapsulated in sheaths, and these are the ones which are going to form the muscle spindle. Okay, muscle spindle. One function I've already mentioned, and that is it has its proprioceptors, so they pick up the length and velocity of the muscle. Now over here, remember that the intrafusal muscle, there are two types, correct? One is a nuclear bag fiber. So this particular structure which you can see, we can call it to be a nuclear bag fibers. Okay, they are centrally located and they have two functions or two sensations they pick up. They pick up a length as well as they pick up the velocity. Okay, these are the nuclear bag fibers. Nuclear bag fibers. Okay, and what do they pick up? They pick up the length as well as velocity. Okay, coming to see this, the one which is over here, these are the chain one. They are the chain fibers. Okay, they are arranged the chain like fashion. Okay, over here the proprioceptives are more sensitive to length. These are the chain one. See, in the bag we mentioned about length and the velocity, right? But in chain, I am going to say that more of length is being understood. They are more sensitive to the length than the velocity. Okay, so this is a little detail about the skeletal muscle fiber. Just remember. Next one is about the gamma motor neurons. See, already I have mentioned that gamma motor neurons innervates the intrafusal muscle, right? So basically, the first thing which has to happen is that a gamma motor neuron. Okay, gamma motor neuron are the one which has to act. Now, why gamma motor neuron has to act? Always remember, the gamma motor neurons are the ones which help in the activation of the alpha motor neurons, and then only the bones, the tendons will pull, or the extrafusal muscles are going to contract. They pull the tendon, and subsequently there will be a pulling of the bone. Okay, so gamma motor neurons are very much important. Why it is important? Because they are going to activate the sensory fibers, and they are going the sensory fibers are going to stimulate the alpha motor neurons. Okay, just a gist of it. See, the gamma motor neuron, you can see this particular image. See, this is the gamma motor neuron. So basically, what exactly happens is, the gamma motor neurons, they are going to release acetylcholine. Okay, these are the vesicles over here, and from the vesicles, acetylcholine is going to get released. Correct? Now, same time, what happens is, the sodium, okay, the sodium ions are going to enter into the neuron. Okay, they are going to enter into the neuron, and once the sodium enters into the neuron, what happens? They are going to generate not ATP, action potential. They are going to generate action potential. Okay, now when action potential is generated, automatically they are going to activate the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So when the sarcoplasmic reticulum is activated, they push out the calcium. Okay, from here they will push out the calcium, and this particular calcium will bind to the cross bridge. These are the cross bridge, and once this they bind to the cross bridge, they induce stretching, and that is the reason they are going to activate the sensory fiber. In turn, what happens? They are going to stimulate the alpha motor neurons. Okay, and once this alpha motor neurons are been activated, again the sodium enters the cell. The sodium enters the cell, and that means what? Whatever nerve is there, the nerve moves from a resting potential to a threshold potential. Again, the voltage gated channels open up, more sodium will flow inside, and finally it will generate action potential. And when the action potential is there, they will travel down to the sensory fibers, and thus there is going to be, a contraction of the extrafusal muscle, pulling of the tendon, and subsequently pulling of the uh, bone for a particular kind of movement. Okay, that is it. You have to remember this much about a gamma motor neuron. Next one, just about the spinal cord level for deep tendon reflex. So remember the values of it. So talking about the first one, and that is our biceps jerks. So bicep jerk, remember the spinal level is basically the C5 and C6, and the nerves involved is the musculocutaneous nerve. Next one, a brachioradialis jerk. Okay, that is again C5 and C6. Same is with the help of in case of a supinator jerk also. But for a brachioradialis, and same one, same brachioradialis as well as the supinator, both the nerves are same. That is a radial nerve. So all the three, that is biceps, brachioradialis, and supinator, all are dealing with the C5 to C6, but the nerves are different. For brachioradialis and supinator, we have the radial nerve, but for biceps jerk, we have a musculocutaneous nerve. Okay. Next, one more jerk is there where radial nerve is involved, and that is a triceps jerk. But here the root level is C7 to C8. C7, C8. Okay. Next one, we have L3, L4, that is knee jerk or patellar jerk. Okay, where femoral nerve is involved. And ankle jerk, that is S1 and S2, where tibial nerve is involved. So this particular table you have to by heart. Biceps jerk, supinator jerk, brachioradialis, they are C5, C6. Triceps jerk, C7, C8. Patellar or the knee jerk, we have L3, L4. And ankle, we have S1, S2. Okay, and remember the nerves involved. Biceps jerk, musculocutaneous, brachioradialis, supinator, as well as triceps, these are radial nerve. Patellar, the femoral, patellar and the knee jerk, we have femoral, and ankle jerk, we have tibial. Okay, so that was about the reflexes, the tracks, the white matter, gray matter, everything. Next one, let us talk about the blood supply to the spinal cord. So talking about the blood supply to the spinal cord, remember that the arteries serving the spinal cord are basically three. There are two posterior and one anterior artery. Okay, two posterior and one anterior. So talking about the two posterior and anterior spinal artery. Okay, yeah. See, basically, you can see over here. Second, yeah. These are the one which I am drawing in blue. They are the vertebral artery. Now the vertebral artery is going to have branches, right? There is a posterior inferior cerebral artery, correct? And from there we have two posterior spinal artery. Okay, two posterior spinal artery, and plus in between we have a anterior spinal artery. So these are the main branches that supply the blood to the spinal cord. So what are they? We have two posterior spinal artery, which is basically a branch of vertebral artery. Okay, and one more branch of vertebral artery is the anterior spinal artery. Okay, so these are the ones which are going to supply the spinal cord. Once again, see this image very carefully. Yeah, this is going to help you. Sorry. Yeah. So here we have the vertebral artery. So vertebral artery gives away two branches. Posterior spinal artery, one is over here and the other one is here, correct? And one anterior spinal artery which comes in the middle, correct? So we have two posterior spinal artery and one anterior spinal artery, both of which are a branch of vertebral artery, and that is a blood supply to the spinal cord. Okay. Next, we have one more. Now we have other segmental branches. See, not only the starting, right, but the other particular parts also require blood, correct? So let us see. There is a segmental branch. So segmental branches of deep cervical artery. Okay, we have cervical branch of deep cervical artery. We have ascending cervical artery. Okay, we have intercostal arteries, intercostal artery and lumbar artery. So basically these are the ones you have to remember. The other segmental branches, the segmental branches of the deep cervical, okay, segmental branch of ascending cervical, then the posterior intercostal muscles, intercostal arteries, as well as the lumbar artery. These are the other arteries that supply blood to the spinal cord. Okay, so please remember. Next one, we are going to deal with the upper motor neuron as well as the lower motor neuron. Yeah. So next one, upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron. I'll just give you an idea. See, the cell bodies which are located in the motor cortex. Okay. The cell body which are located in the motor cortex is known as an upper motor neuron. The cell body is located in the motor cortex. Okay. That is upper motor neuron. And the cell bodies which are present either in the spinal cord or in the cranial nerve nuclei, they are the lower motor neuron. That is the difference. The cell bodies which are present in the motor cortex, we call it to be a upper motor neuron, and the cell bodies which is present either in the spinal cord or in the cranial nerve nuclei, we call it to be a lower motor neuron. Okay. See, the lower motor neuron, they are directed towards the skeletal muscle, whereas the upper motor neuron which is there, they synapse with the lower motor neurons. See, upper motor neuron will synapse with the lower motor neuron, whereas the lower motor neuron, they are directed towards the skeletal muscles. That is it. Okay. This is a major difference of a upper motor neuron and a lower motor neuron. Correct. Now, if at all if at all there is any kind of lesion in the upper motor neuron, or you can say upper motor neuron lesions can be caused by either they can be a stroke, okay, probably a cardiovascular accident, both ischemic as well as a hemorrhagic, okay, which is the most important cause that can lead to upper motor neuron lesions. Apart from that, any kind of demyelination diseases like multiple sclerosis, Friedreich ataxia and B12 deficiency, these can also lead to upper motor neuron lesions. And plus ALS means the amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, okay, one of the motor neuron disease it is, which again can lead to a upper motor neuron lesion. Okay, and remember, whenever that happens, it can lead to a pseudobulbar palsy. Okay, pseudobulbar palsy. Coming to the lower motor neurons, okay, I'll talk about the damage first and then we'll talk about something else. Then, so lower motor neuron lesions can be caused by either any kind of virus, may it be a poliomyelitis, West Nile fever virus. Then it can be due to a spinal muscle atrophy. We had already mentioned that the lower motor neuron is directed towards the skeletal muscles, right? So any kind of spinal muscle atrophy, quadra equina syndrome. Okay, quadra equina syndrome, what exactly happens? The damage happens to the axon, right? Probably because of a disc herniation. Then diabetic neuropathy can lead to a lower motor neuron lesion. The botulism, okay, all these can lead to a lower motor neuron lesion. And when that happens, what it can lead to? It can lead to a bulbar palsy. Okay, bulbar palsy. Now, coming to the tracts over here and a little of the nucleus. The upper motor neuron, okay, we have two kind of tracts. One is a corticospinal tract and the other one is a corticobulbar tract. Corticospinal and corticobulbar. Whereas the lower motor neuron, again we have two types. We have anterior, it is dealing with the anterior gray horn, and some specific cranial nuclei is also there. So talking about the specific cranial nerve nuclei, we have a trigeminal nucleus which is dealing with the mastication, nucleus ambiguous in which cranial nerve 9, 10 and partly 11 is involved, wherein the centers are basically muscles of pharynx, larynx, uvula and palate. Okay, apart from that we have a hypoglossal nucleus which is again having its center for the tongue muscles. Okay, so this is about the UMN and LMN and the lesions. Okay, so with that we finish the spinal cord. Now uh, we'll go into the brain. See, brain is going to be a little vast topic again. So I'll try to concise most of them. If any doubts are there, you can ask me. So talking about the brain over here. So we'll start with the parts of the brain. So we're talking about the largest part of the brain. We are going to deal with a cerebrum. Okay. So talking about the cerebrum, you can see the entire cerebrum over here. Cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and which is located superiorly and anteriorly in relation to the brainstem. Okay, we'll deal with the brainstem later on. See, a cerebrum basically has two cerebral hemispheres. Okay, we have two cerebral hemispheres, one left cerebral hemisphere and the other one is a right cerebral hemisphere, which cannot be shown in this particular picture. Now, when we have a left side and we have a right side, basically it will be separated with something, right? And we call it to be a falx cerebri, okay, of the dura mater. What do we call it to be? We call it to be a falx cerebri. Okay, and if at all someone is asking from where or embryologically, cerebrum is derived from what? Cerebrum is derived from the prosencephalon. Okay, prosencephalon. Just remember that. So next one, coming to the a little about the anatomical position. So where does a cerebrum locate? Cerebrum locates actually within the bony cranium, right? It extends from the frontal bone anteriorly and to the occipital bone posteriorly. Correct. Now talking about the internal structure. So the internal structure of a cerebrum, just like a spinal cord, is divided into two types of tissue. One is a gray matter, the other one is a white matter. Correct. So talking about the gray matter as such, it forms the surface of the each cerebral hemisphere, and that is what we call it to be a cerebral cortex. So here we're dealing with the cerebral cortex. Okay, and what is the cerebral cortex? So basically the gray matter that forms the surface of each cerebral hemisphere is known as a cerebral cortex, and it is associated with two things. One is processing and the other one is cognition. Okay, processing and cognition. Apart from that, we have white matter too, right? So white matter actually forms the bulk of the deeper parts of the brain. They consist of the glial cells, the myelinated axons that connect via they connect the various gray matter areas. Okay, now falx cerebri, which I have already mentioned. Now over here there are other few things also which you have to remember. So you can see the image over here. Okay, so the falx cerebri I have mentioned, it divides it into left and right, right? But apart from that, the two cerebral hemispheres are connected by a white matter structure. It has not been shown over here, but remember the name is corpus callosum. Okay, corpus callosum. Apart from that, we do have sulcus. Okay, you can see the white you can see a central sulcus, the one which I am just right now marking in the red. That is the central sulcus, the groove that separates the frontal as well as the parietal lobes. The groove that separates the frontal and the parietal lobe is known as a central sulcus. Okay, let me see if I have a so apart from that, we have lateral sulcus too. Okay, lateral sulcus. So talking about the lateral sulcus, remember they are going to again separate the frontal and the parietal lobes from the temporal lobe. Okay, from the temporal lobe. Apart from that, we have a lunate sulcus. Lunate sulcus is basically nothing but a groove which is located in the occipital cortex. Then we have few main gyri which is present. So talking about the gyri, we'll talk about gyri in a few minutes. Okay, we have precentral gyrus, postcentral gyrus, then superior temporal gyrus and all that. We'll deal with it. So talking, see, this one was the lateral sulcus. Okay, if at all we want to see about the precentral gyrus. See, precentral gyrus is basically a ridge which directly a ridge which is present directly anterior to the central sulcus. So the one which has been marked over here in a blue light blue color, the one in the light blue color, okay, now this is a precentral gyrus, okay, in the frontal lobe which is present, which is the location of a primary motor cortex, okay. Apart from that, we have a post-central gyrus. See, post just after the central sulcus, that is the one which is there in the green. Right now I'm marking in the violet. That is a post-central gyrus, a location of a primary somato sensory cortex, and this ridge directly is present posterior to the central sulcus. Now, but one more thing we have, and that is a superior temporal sulcus. See, this particular area which I'm marking right now is basically a superior temporal sulcus. Okay, a ridge which is located inferior to the lateral sulcus, and this is the area which is responsible for reception and processing of sound. Okay, reception and processing of the sound. Now, next one, let us see about the lobes. Okay, talking about the frontal lobe first. So you can see the image, the one which is there in the blue color, that is a frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is basically located beneath the frontal lobe, frontal bone, okay, and is the most anterior region of the cerebrum. Okay, anterior region of the cerebrum. Already I had mentioned from the temporal, as well as from the parietal lobe, they are being divided. How are they divided? From the temporal bone, they are divided with the help of a lateral sulcus. Okay, from a temporal bone, they are divided with the help of a lateral sulcus, whereas from parietal bone, they are divided with the help of a central sulcus. Okay, remember, and the association areas of the frontal lobe, they are responsible for all the higher intellectual personality, the mood, the social conduct, and the language. Okay, this area is quite important. Okay. See, one more thing, this lateral sulcus is otherwise named to be a Sylvian fissure. Okay, Sylvian fissure. Now, as I was telling about the functions of a frontal lobe, basically they are, they have a primary motor cortex, they do have, but apart from that, they have a motor association cortex. So in the motor association cortex, let me just see, you can see over here, we have a primary motor cortex, we have a premotor cortex, we have an anterior premotor cortex, a dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, as well as a lateral frontopolar cortex. Then we have a ventral anterior premotor cortex and a lateral prefrontal cortex. Okay, basically there are many areas in case of our frontal bone, and all these are very, very important. Okay, they are very, very important. Now, one by one we will see about the primary motor cortex. So talking about the primary motor cortex, it is involved in the voluntary movement, particularly the skeletal muscles. Okay, it is involved in the voluntary movement, particularly the skeletal muscles. Coming to the motor association cortex, we have premotor cortex and a supplementary motor cortex, right? Now these both are involved in planning, sequence, and execution of movement. We plan, we have a sequence of a movement as well as we execute it. Okay, all those are because of the functioning of a motor association cortex. Next one, talking about the frontal eye fields. Okay, the voluntary rapid eye movements, they are going to deal with, they are being dealt by the frontal eye fields. Next one, we have a prefrontal cortex. They are involved in the memory, learning, motor planning, personality, and behavior. Okay, that is what a prefrontal cortex is dealing with. Coming to the Broca's area. Okay, see, whenever we talk about Broca's area, we always tend to confuse with the Wernicke's area. But remember, Broca's area predominantly in the dominant hemisphere, it is involved in the muscles of speech. Okay, it is involved in the muscles of speech. Okay, remember that. Next one, little in detail. See, when in this particular image you might have seen, right, BA4, BA6. Okay, basically they are the Brodmann's area, which are quite important to mention. So talking about the primary motor cortex. In short, I have just mentioned that it is basically dealing with the voluntary movement, particularly skeletal muscles. But when we talk in detail, basically a primary motor cortex that is a Brodmann's area 4, the one which is marked in blue over here, they send in motor information from the cortex to the brainstem and to the spinal cord. Okay, spinal cord for the final motor plan. Then they also send either to the brainstem areas or through the brainstem to the spine. Okay, so basically whatever tracks are there from the motor cortex, they are involved in voluntary movement. Okay, voluntary motor movement. Okay, voluntary motor movement. As I have mentioned, right, particularly the skeletal muscles. Okay, and this particular area, the primary motor cortex, they are involved in planning and initiation of the voluntary movements. Okay, and also they tend to control the muscles of the muscular activity of the opposite side of the body. Okay, opposite side of the body. There are two kind of tracks over here in relation to the primary motor cortex, that is corticospinal tract and corticobulbar tract. Okay, corticospinal tract and corticobulbar tract. Please remember that. Okay, and now the basic nerves which are in relation to the primary motor cortex, that is important. So talking about the nerves which are present in the in relation to the primary motor cortex, remember Brodmann area 4, we have trigeminal nerve. Okay, we have a trigeminal nerve. Okay, that helps in the muscles of mastication. A facial nerve, that is muscles of facial expression, and also a combination of glossopharyngeal, vagus, as well as a spinal accessory nerve. Okay, see the glossopharyngeal as well as the vagus nerve, they supply the pharynx, larynx, uvula, and the soft palate, whereas the spinal accessory nerve, they are going to supply the same region, plus they are going to have sternocleidomastoid mastoid muscle, the trapezius muscle, and also it supplies the tongue. Apart from that, we have the hypoglossal muscles. Okay, hypoglossal nerve, which innervates the tongue. So these are in relation to the primary motor cortex. See, and I've already mentioned that in primary motor cortex, we have two tracks, or dealing with the two tracks, or ends in two tracks, that is corticospinal tract as well as the corticobulbar tract. Correct? Now, in relation to this, there is one more thing which you have to remember, and that is the cerebral homunculus. Okay, so basically, where and all, which are the parts and where exactly it happens. This might be helpful for you. See, remember the area of the body and location in the primary motor cortex. See, every part of the brain is assigned with a job, right, of a particular part of the body. So about the foot, which is it is found in the deep within the longitudinal fissure. Talking about the leg. Okay, this particular image you can see. Okay, talking about the leg. Where the leg is located, actually the location is basically, it travels laterally up through the surface of the longitudinal fissure. Okay, it is through the surface. Then we have hip. Okay, talking about the hip, it is located at the longitudinal fissure. Then we have trunk, that is posteriorly alongside the outer section of the central gyrus. Arms and hands, they are towards the lateral sulcus. Superior to the lateral sulcus, we have the head, and tongue we have basically located within the lateral sulcus. So these are just an information of the cerebral homunculus. Might not asked till date, but if at all it is they have asked, if at all they ask it, you might have to know. Next one, we have something called a motor association cortex. So talking about a motor association cortex, we have a premotor cortex, which is having a Brodmann area 6, as well as we have a supplementary motor area. Okay, supplementary motor area. I have already mentioned they are dealing with planning, sequence, as well as execution of the movement, right? So over here, when we talk about the premotor cortex, premotor cortex, you can see the one which has been marked in red over here or orange, they are the primary, so that is the primary motor cortex, and the one in blue over here, okay, the one in blue, that is a premotor cortex, and just above it a small one, we have a supplementary, okay, the one which is marked in violet or pink, we have a supplementary motor cortex. Okay, so basically what we can say, if at all we want to define a premotor cortex, premotor cortex, pre it is located laterally beside the primary motor cortex and finishes in the superior region. Okay, and what about the supplementary motor area? We can say that it is located most superiorly, okay, most superiorly, and leads down into the longitudinal fissure. Okay, and basically supplementary motor area is the one which receives the input from the somatosensory cortex, or they're involved in the higher motor functions like the planning and programming the motor sequences, and it controls the bimanual task. Okay, apart from that, the lesions which are there in this particular area, if at all there is a lesion, it will produce difficulty in performing, because all the higher motor functions will be hindered, right? So anyway, there will be a difficulty in performing complex motor activities. Okay, and the activities that involve the bimanual coordination, all those will not happen in case of our lesion. Okay, so both, may it be a premotor cortex or a supplementary cortex, supplementary motor area, okay, both are involved in fine motor movement. Okay, they are involved in fine motor movement. Okay, they are going to supply the axial muscle, the proximal limb muscles. Okay, and also already we had mentioned there is movement through planning, sequence, and execution. Okay, so that is about a motor association cortex. Next one, let us see about the prefrontal cortex. We had already mentioned about a prefrontal cortex, and the one which is again in a blue over here, it has a lot many Brodmann's area, 8 to 12, then 24, 25, 32, 45, and 47. Okay, they're involved in the personality and behavior, the working memory, then cognition and learning, decision making, reasoning, judgment, and motor planning. Okay, all these are being dealt with the prefrontal cortex. Okay, basically they communicate with the areas by sending information back to the prefrontal cortex for motor planning. Okay, then again the structure, and let us see the information which is sent by prefrontal cortex. So we were just telling that it communicates with following areas, right? The areas are hippocampus. So talking about the hippocampus, the information which is sent by a prefrontal cortex is basically of the memory and cognition. Next one, hypothalamus, that is about the personality. Amygdala deals with the personality and behavior. The ventral tegmental area, basically they are known as the reward centers. Okay, all the additions and decision making skills are related to the ventral tegmental area. We have the posterior association area, where all the auditory, sensory, visual signals are being dealt with. So these are the information and the related structure. Okay. Next one, about the frontal eye fields. Talking about the frontal eye fields, we have a specific Brodmann area, that is 8. Okay, involved in the saccadic eye movement. Okay, rapid eye movements or alternately rapid eye movement. And the nerves are very much important, driven through a communication with oculomotor nerve, abducens nerve, and the paramedian pontine reticular formation. Okay, paramedian pontine reticular formation. Okay, now that is quite important. Okay, now these are the basically areas. Okay, the frontal eyelid, the right the right eyelid actually will send the information to the contralateral side. Okay, all that will happen, and then from there the left cranial nerve, that to 6th cranial nerve, will take it off, and then again they are going to, I just was mentioning about the pontine reticular formation and all that, right? So basically after that they are going to cross again to the right, and that to the cranial nerve 3. There are lot many things which are going on, but just remember that whenever there is a damage to the area of the frontal eyelid, okay, there can be an ipsilateral conjugate gaze vision. Okay, because the eye cannot pull towards one direction, and that is why there will be a deviation on the alternate side, which will lead to ipsilateral conjugate gaze deviation. Okay, now apart from that, let us see about the Broca's area. So talking about the Broca's area, it lies immediately anterior to the primary motor cortex. Okay, and immediately above the Sylvian fissure. We have already mentioned this is a lateral fissure, right? Yeah, this is the lateral fissure or the Sylvian lateral sulcus or the Sylvian fissure. Just above it, we are going to see the Broca's area. Okay, we have a Broca's area which is going to have the proximal area 44 and 45 involved in the muscles of speech. Now, this remember that it is always generally located on the non-dominant side of the individual, and the Broca's area automatically communicates with the vernix area by a particular arcuate vesiculus. Okay, it communicates with the vernix area with the help of a arcuate vesiculus, and remember, they take the information about the words that should be spoken. They take the information about the words that can be spoken. See, not only about uh, the words which are spoken, but if at all there is a Broca's aphasia, basically it is an expressive aphasia. That means whatever they talk, okay, it will not it will be a non-fluent talk. Grammatically they will be incorrect, and but the comprehension will be correct, intact. So remember, whenever there is an information that has to be sent via from the Broca's area via the brainstem, they will connect with the few number of nerves. See, what are the nerves? We'll see. We have facial nerve, we have cranial nerves. There are 9, 10 and a little cranial part of 11. Apart from that, we have hypoglossal nerve. These are the nerves with which a Broca's area is going to connect. Okay. So facial nerve, then we have a nucleus ambiguous. That is a nucleus which comes out from the couple of nerves, that is cranial nerve 9, 10 and a little cranial part of 11, and the cranial nerve 12, that is a hypoglossal nerve. Correct? See, each and everything has to be there has to be a reason why the involvement of facial nerve is happening. See, whenever a facial nerve, that means basically they are acting with the orbicularis oris, right? So that means what? They are going to change the shape of the mouth. See, each and every word that comes out from our mouth, they do have a change of facial expression as well as the shape, right, of the mouth is going to change. See, and that is the reason the way the language can be heard and interpreted are different, because of the way the mouth, the shape of the mouth changes when we spell each word. Okay, and that has been dealt with a facial nerve. Next one, about the nucleus ambiguous. See, not only the shape of the mouth has to be changed, but also the important structures like uvula, pharynx, larynx, as well as soft palate. Everything has to do with our talking, right? See, the important they basically help in the voice modulation. And apart from that, the hypoglossal nerve, they stimulate the muscles of the tongue for having a proper speech, and that is how a Broca's area is going to help in a speech. Okay. Next one, just a difference between a Broca's and a vernix area of vernix aphasia. See, vernix area is basically dealing with language comprehension, but language production is basically Broca's area, and that is the reason I was telling that whenever there is a Broca's aphasia, comprehension will be intact, because comprehension is being dealt with vernix area. Okay. And how are we going to understand whether it is a Broca's aphasia or a vernix aphasia? See, Broca's area, we will not be able to express what we are going to say. An expressive aphasia, there is no issue in understanding. Okay, but the thing is that they are not able to complete the sentences, but they have awareness that okay, there is some problem with me. But in case of vernix aphasia, a form of receptive aphasia it will be. Whatever they are talking, it will be very difficult to understand. You get difficulty understanding the speech. That is about the Broca's as well as vernix aphasia. Next one. Yeah, and a little more about the vernix. See, there will be a sense in whatever vernix person, I mean, like a person affected with vernix aphasia is there, but it's just that we will not understand. Okay, it is difficult for us to understand what they are talking. There will not be a proper sense in whatever they are talking. Next one, let us deal with the next lobe, and that is a parietal lobe. I know that is a quite important topic, and that is why I am taking it in detail. Uh, yeah, so talking about the parietal lobe, it is found below the parietal bone, okay, parietal bone of the calvaria. And remember, a parietal bone will be present in between the frontal lobe anteriorly and occipital lobe posteriorly. Okay, and how it is going to separate from the frontal lobe with the help of a central sulcus, and how it is going to separate from occiput with the help of a parieto-occipital sulcus. Correct. So let us deal it a little in detail about it. Nothing much to tell anatomically much about the parietal lobe. So anteriorly already I have mentioned, frontal lobe with the help of a lateral sulcus, from the temporal lobe with the help of a lateral sulcus or Sylvian fissure, as well as from the occipital lobe with the help of a parieto-occipital sulcus. You can see the image clearly which has been written. The one in the green, parieto-occipital sulcus, the one in the blue, that is a central sulcus, and the one in the violet, that is a parietal lobe, a Sylvian fissure or the lateral sulcus. Now, there are lot many, again, we have multiple important structures which you have to understand within the lobes. Okay. One is basically, I'll just see the image. One is basically the primary somatosensory cortex. See, primary somatosensory cortex is basically dealing with the conscious awareness of somatic sensation. We have one more, that is a somatosensory association cortex. They basically help in analyzing and recognition of the somatic sensations. All the memory storage of the somatic sensation. If someone comes and pinches you, it will be stored in your memory, the pain, right? That and all will be there in the somatosensory association cortex. Then we have a posterior association area. So basically, that the part which overlies the occiput as well as temporal lobe. They are basically dealing with the integration of somatic, visual, and auditory sensation. Now, over here, the primary somatosensory cortex, which is basically dealing with the conscious awareness of a somatic sensation, we have or they receive the information, okay, through two pathways. Okay, one is the dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway. We had mentioned, right? Fasciculus gracilis, fasciculus cuneatus. Okay, from there, okay, all the information on fine and discriminative touch, proprioception, and vibration medulla. They after the, from the T6 and T5, from there the fibers are going to come. They decussate at the medulla, and then they are going to arrive at the contralateral side of the cortex. Okay, that is about the dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway in relation to the primary somatosensory cortex. One more, the spinothalamic pathways. Okay, see over here, the fibers actually decussate at the spinal cord, and then they arrive at the contralateral. Whenever decussation happens, that means they cross over, right? So from there they arrive at the contralateral side of the cortex. Okay, and what are the information? The informations are basically pain, temperature, crude touch, and pressure. Okay. See, in case of primary somatosensory cortex, basically the medial cortex corresponds to the lower extremity, and lateral cortex corresponds to the upper extremity and the face. Okay. Next one, we were talking about the somatosensory association cortex. I was mentioning, right? Memory storage of somatic sensations. Okay, the Broadsman area 5. Yeah, sorry. We are talking about the Broadsman area 5. It receives the somatosensory information from the primary association cortex. Okay, and what they do, they analyze this information to determine that the size of an object, the texture, the weight of an object, the position in 3D space, all that, and then they are going to compare this information with the previous. See, suppose we hold a particular pen in our hand. Okay, Next time when we hold a pen, we are supposed to understand that this is a pen, right? A pattern recognition. But this somatosensory association cortex helps in it. First is when we hold a particular a substance, we are going to analyze the size of an object, the texture, the weight of an object, the position in 3D space, and then we are going to compare this particular information to any previous experiences which are there. Okay, and then what we are going to do there, we are going to store the new information in the memory. Okay. With respect to this, if at all there is any problem in the somatosensory association cortex, remember to inability to identify an object only by touch. What do we call it to be? We call it to be astereognosis. We have agraphisthasia too. That is inability to recognize letters or numbers drawn on the skin. Astatognosis. That is to identify inability to identify a body part position. Okay. Abarognosis. That is identify or inability to recognize the weight differences. Okay. These are in relation to this. So please remember. Next one, we are talking about the posterior association area. So talking about a posterior association area, this one is basically a multimodal association area. Basically, it integrates stimuli from various areas of your brain. Okay, it receives information from somatosensory area, auditory, and visual association cortexes also. So what they are going to do? They are going to take all the information. Okay, they are going to take they are going to take all the information. They'll make sense of the situation around us and develop a spatial coordination. And finally, what they're going to do, whatever information they have taken, they're going to send it or communicate with the prefrontal cortex and the motor cortex. Okay, so this was about the parietal lobe. Next one, talking about the temporal lobe. Yeah. So talking about the temporal lobe actually sits beneath the temporal bone of the calvaria, right? Cranium. And it is there inferior to the parietal as well as the frontal lobes. Correct. And with help of what sulcus it is being divided from the frontal and the parietal lobes? That is by the lateral sulcus. Otherwise, we call it to be a Sylvian fissure. Correct. And all the cortical association areas of the temporal bone, they are dealing with the memory and language. Okay, memory and language, and this includes the hearing hearing, and it is a location of the primary auditory cortex. Okay, primary auditory cortex. Now coming to the functions and all that. See, not only primary auditory cortex, it has auditory association cortex, vernix area, then primary olfactory cortex, olfactory association area, as well as something called the insular cortex, which cannot be seen as such. If at all we are going to cut this particular part, underneath this we can actually see a insular cortex. Okay, now we'll see one by one. A primary auditory cortex, Broadsman area number 22. What does a primary auditory cortex do? They're going to get involved in the conscious awareness of sound stimuli. Correct. What are the three kind of characteristic features of the sound which a primary auditory cortex deals with? They are frequency, pitch, and location. Okay, and but that means what? If at all any lesion is there in the primary auditory cortex, what is going to happen? There is going to be contralateral loss of sound stimuli. Okay, probably they will not be able to understand the look from where the sound is coming. They will not be able to understand what the pitch of the sound as well as the frequency of the sound. They will not understand all this. Next one, coming to the auditory association cortex. Okay, once the stimuli has arrived into the primary auditory cortex, what they are going to do? They are going to send the information to the auditory association cortex, and from there they are going to analyze the pitch. They are going to localize it, and they are also going to find out the amplitude of the sound. Okay, and what after analyzing all this, they are going to compare the sound, the characteristics of this sound with any of the previous sounds which we have heard, and if at all that matches, we will be able to recognize the meaning and significance of the sound stimulus. Okay, all these are interlinked actually. Also, just a little bit of the vernix area. We have already mentioned about vernix aphasia quite a long back. So vernix area, we have Broadsman area 22, 39 and 40. Basically what it deals with, comprehension and understanding of a written and a spoken language. Correct. So basically whatever visual cues are there from a visual or association cortex, they are going to take it, and they are going to, which is there in the basically in the occipital lobe, they are going to take it and all the auditory information from the auditory association cortex, we're going to take it in the temporal lobe. Okay, so once we get the information, we are going to comprehend the language that is written or spoken. Okay, and then what happens? The vernix area will take all the information and then they will send the impulse to the Broca's area. Okay, Broca's area, where the stimulating where they're going to stimulate the muscles. Okay, for speech production. Okay, that is how a vernix area works. Next one about the primary olfactory cortex as well as a olfactory association cortex. Now they are located deep in the temporal lobe, probably at the level of uncus, and that too on the middle portion of the brain. See, remember the function of it, that is, which is the most important. They're going to get involved in awareness of the smell. Okay, olfactory, right? All this time we were talking about the auditory one. Now we are talking about olfactory. So basically they're going to get involved in the awareness of the smell. And when there's a smell, they are going to analyze it, they're going to recognize it, and again, same thing, identify the smell pattern. Okay, and also if it is a new one, they're going to store these patterns in the memory pathway. Okay, very simple function. Lastly, we'll see with the insular cortex. I was telling that if we cut off the little part of the area, we can actually see the insular cortex. So this basic area which I'm marking in red is the insular cortex, which is located deep in the lateral fissure. Okay, lateral fissure. Now there are few information or few function which you have to remember. See, it receives a visceral sensation. Okay, any pain and temperature information from the organs like lung, heart, and the GI tract. Okay, all these are being received. You see, these are the visceral sensation, right? So what happens is this particular information will be sent to insula. Okay, and from there, the insula, they are going to analyze, they are going to recognize, and they're going to store these or store the memory of these visceral sensation. And not only that, they are also going to receive the vestibular sensations from the inner ear. Okay, inner ear, and that is how we become more aware of a dynamic and static equilibrium. Okay, also the taste, okay, receives gustation. Okay, that is from the taste buds in the fungiform papillae and the valid papillae. Okay, that is a particular tract which they have given. So from there, the nucleus of tractus solitarius, they take it up and then they send it to insula. Okay, and then again the same old thing. Insula is going to differentiate between the taste, whether it is a sweet, salt, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. Okay, all these are basically the function of a insula. Lastly, we have one more, and that is a occipital lobe. Once we talk about the occipital lobe, we will be completing with our cerebrum. So talking about the occipital lobe, which is the most posterior part of the cerebrum. Okay, and where it is situated below the occipital bone of the cranium. Okay, you can see that its inferior aspect, the inferior aspect of the occipital lobe, they rest upon the tentorium cerebelli. Okay, tentorium cerebelli, and this is the one which segregates the cerebrum from the cerebellum. Okay, so when we talk about cerebellum in detail, we'll talk about it. Okay, and we have a parieto occipital sulcus, right, which is the one which separates the occipital lobe with that of the parietal as well as the temporal lobe. Okay, we'll have a primary visual cortex. We'll be dealing with it right now. So we have a parieto occipital cortex, which is going to separate the occipital lobe and parietal lobe. That is over. But one more thing which we have, and that is a pre-occipital notch. Okay, we have a pre-occipital notch. Correct. Now, what is a pre-occipital notch? It is an imaginary line actually between the pre-occipital notch and the lateral sulcus. See, this is a Sylvian sulcus, right? Sylvian sulcus or the lateral sulcus. Between that, we have an imaginary line, and that is known as a pre-occipital notch. Now, we have two different cortices which is found in the occipital lobe, which is very much important. One is a primary visual cortex. The other one is a visual association cortex. See, the primary visual cortex, very simple. The Broadsman area 17. Okay, Broadsman area 17. So what it is involved with? It is involved with the conscious awareness of the visual stimuli. Okay, visual stimuli. Okay, we have the visual pathway is involved in his. So visual stimulus whenever it is there. Okay, we have a nasal retina as well as a temporal retina, right? See, temporal retina is basically in the lateral side. Temporal retina is basically in the lateral side, and temporal retina is the one which does not decussate, which does not cross over. The one which is going to cross over is always the nasal retina. Okay, nasal retina. The temporal retina on both the sides, remember, they are the one which is going to perceive the objects on the contralateral sides. And nasal retina, they are found in the medial. They decussate at the optic chiasma. Okay, this is optic chiasma, and it perceives objects on the ipsilateral side. Okay, ipsilateral side. Just a important thing which you have to remember. Next one, let us talk about the visual association cortex. So talking about a visual association cortex, you can see this particular area, a visual association cortex. They are involved in analyzing, recognizing, as well as memorizing and understanding a visual stimuli. Okay, this visual association cortex, they actually receive the image. See, basically when we see a particular thing, a primary visual cortex will take it off, correct, and then they're going to pass this information to the visual association cortex, and then our visual association cortex is going to understand the shape, the color, the size, and the movement. Okay, and after that they're going to again association cortex, right? So they are going to do what? They're going to compare it to the past memory, and finally they'll be allowing us to recognize the particular object. See, tomorrow I am going to or today I'm seeing a water bottle, and tomorrow I have to understand that, okay, this is water bottle itself, and who is going to help us in all this? Visual association cortex is going to help us in this. Okay, next one. After this we need to understand the blood supply. Okay, so talking about the vasculature of our cerebrum. Okay, cerebrum can be classified into three distinct pairs. You can just see the image over here. Okay, an image. Yeah, we have the ones which have been marked in yellow is anterior cerebral arteries. See, anterior cerebral, these are the three, major arteries that supply the blood to the cerebrum. One is the anterior cerebral artery, then we have a medial cerebral artery, and we have a posterior cerebral artery. Okay, talking about an anterior cerebral artery, okay, they are the branches of basically the internal carotid artery. And what are they going to supply? They are going to supply the anteromedial aspect of the cerebrum. Okay, anteromedial aspect of the cerebrum. Then we have a middle cerebral artery. Middle cerebral artery is not a branch exactly, but a continuation of an internal carotid artery, and they supply the lateral portions of the cerebrum. Okay, next one, we have a posterior cerebral artery. They are the branches of basilar arteries, and they supply both the medial and lateral sides of the cerebrum, posteriorly, that too. So remember, what are the arteries that supply blood to the cerebrum? They are the anterior cerebral artery, a middle cerebral artery, and a posterior cerebral artery. Okay, and if at all we are talking about the venous drainage, see, venous drainage of cerebrum is via a network of cerebral veins. Okay, now from these cerebral veins we are going to empty it into the dural venous sinuses. Okay, dural venous sinuses. So just remember, so this was about the cerebrum as such. Yeah. With this, cerebrum is over. Next one, we'll see a little about the meninges. So when we talk about meninges basically refer to the membranous coverings of the brain and the spinal cord, right? Basically, a meninges is divided into three layers. One is a dura mater, we have an arachnoid mater, and we have a pia mater. Okay, these coverings have two major functions basically. First one, they're going to provide supportive framework for the cerebral as well as cranial vasculature. Second one, they act with the CSF fluid, okay, the cerebrospinal fluid, to protect the CNS from any mechanical damage. Okay, and you see that whenever the meninges are involved in a particular cerebral pathology, the common site of the meninges become the common site of infection, okay, and all the intracranial bleeds, which you might clearly understand when in forensic medicine, when they deal with all the accidents and subchorionic, sorry, not arachnoid matter, subdural hemorrhages and all. At that time it becomes very much important for you, all the RTA cases. First one, we have to deal with the dura mater. Okay, so talking about the dura mater, this is basically the outermost area. Okay, that is basically the outermost layer of the meninges, and it is located directly underneath the bone. See, this is the cranium, right? This is the bone. This particular area which has been marked right now is the bone. Just below it, we are going to find a thick, tough, and inextensible layer, and that is what we call it to be a dura mater. Okay, dura mater is basically having two layer of sheets of connective tissue. One we call it to be a periosteal layer. Other one we call a meningeal layer. A meningeal as well as a periosteal. Sorry, meningeal as well as periosteal. Yeah. So periosteal layer lines the inner surface of the bones of the cranium. Just below it, we have a first one will be the periosteal. So after the periosteal, located deep to the periosteal, the one which I am marking in the red right now. Sorry. Yeah, one in blue over right now. That is a meningeal one. Okay, it continues with the dura mater of the spinal cord. So over here, between these two layers, between the periosteal, okay, I'll just make sure a little important. So here we are talking about a periosteal layer as well as a meningeal layer, right? So between a periosteal layer and a meningeal layer, we have a particular sinus. Okay, and what is the name of the sinus? The name of the sinus is basically a dural venous sinus. Dural venous sinus. Okay, and this particular dural venous sinus is the one which is responsible for the venous drainage of the cranium. And what are they going to do? From the they are going to take it from the cranium and they are going to enter or empty it into the internal jugular vein. Internal jugular vein. Okay, but what exactly is the blood supply of dura mater? So remember, the dura mater, when we talk about, okay, dura mater, they are going to receive its own vascular supply from the middle meningeal artery. Okay, middle meningeal artery and the vein. Okay, and they are innervated by trigeminal nerve. Okay, trigeminal nerve, very much important. Trigeminal nerve. Okay, so please remember this much about the dura mater. Let us talk about the arachnoid mater next. So talking about the arachnoid mater. Okay. Yeah. Arachnoid matter. Arachnoid matter is the middle layer of the meninges, right? You can see just between the pia mater and the dura mater, we have the arachnoid mater. So basically, there is a middle layer of the meninges lying directly underneath the dura mater. Okay, and it consists of a layer of connective tissue. But remember, they are avascular and they do not receive any innervation. Okay, no innervation. But the only important thing which you have to remember is that underneath the arachnoid space, okay, underneath the arachnoid matter, there is a particular space, and the space which we call it to be a subarachnoid space. Okay, subarachnoid space. This particular space contains the CSF. Okay, and what is the function of CSF? CSF's function is to act like a cushion to the brain. Okay, and not only that, from the arachnoid matter, right, there are small projections which you can see. These projections are basically to the dura mater, and now these projections are known as the arachnoid granulations. They are known as the arachnoid granulations. Okay, so basically what is the function of a arachnoid granulation is that they allow the CSF to re-enter the circulation via the dural venous sinuses. I'll show you an image with the help of that we can understand. You can see this particular finger-like projection, they are the arachnoid granulation. So with the help of this particular fluid, remember, imagine the green one is the CSF, they are going to enter into the dural sinus and then come into the circulation again. Okay. So with that, we finish the arachnoid matter. Last one, we talk about the pia matter. Pia matter is located underneath the subarachnoid matter, subarachnoid space. Correct. Now they are going to be very thin and they are tightly adhered to the surface of the brain and the spinal cord. See, remember, it is the only covering to follow the contours of the brain. All the gyrus, all the fissures, in everything, there is going to be a covering, and that is a pia matter. And this, like the dura matter, the pia matter is going to be highly vascularized. Okay, with the blood vessels will be there. They are going to perforate these, membrane, and they're going to supply the underlying neural tissues. Okay, so this is all about the meninges as such. Yeah. Yeah, a small topic will finish and then we'll wind up for today. So the next topic, which is quite important, is a small one, that is a pineal gland. Just like a small structure, the information regarding this is also small. So pineal gland is basically a small endocrine gland, right, which is located, you can see the one in the yellow color over here, the yellow. Okay, this particular structure is basically a pineal gland, a small endocrine gland located within the brain. And what is its main function? Its main function is to secrete melatonin. Okay, it secretes melatonin. Very much important. Okay, and what is the function of melatonin? It basically regulates the circadian rhythm of the body. Okay, it also produces hormones that inhibit the action of other endocrine glands in the body. Now, so let us little in detail, and that is, pineal gland is a very small glandular body. What is the length of it? It is just 6 millimeter long. Okay, 6 millimeter long. Okay, and we say that it is pine cone shaped. Okay, pine cone shaped, and that is the reason the pineal gland has come from. There are basically two type of cells. Okay, two type of cells which are present in pineal gland. Number one, we have glial cells. Number two, we have pinealocytes. Okay, the glial cells basically are the supporting cells. Most important, pinealocytes, they are the one which are hormone secreting cells. Okay, hormone secreting cells. Okay, see, when a person becomes in the middle age, okay, at that point of time, the gland usually, commonly, they become calcified. So anatomically, or anatomical position, if you want to deal with, always remember, the pineal gland is a midline structure which is located between two cerebral hemispheres. Okay, so if the stalk which is there, this particular stalk, the one which I have just marked in the black right now, the particular stalk of the pineal gland, they are attached to the posterior wall of the third ventricle. Okay, they are, just remember that much. Next one, lastly, about the vasculature of pineal gland. Talking about the vasculature, the arterial vasculature, remember, they are being supplied by posterior choroidal arteries. Posterior choroidal artery, that is the main blood supply. Okay, and venous drainage via the internal cerebral vein. Okay, internal cerebral vein, very much important. Okay, so with this, we have finished quite a lot of topics in which are very much important for today. We have entirely completed the spinal cord, the cerebrum, as well as we have finished pineal gland and the meninges. Okay. So if any doubts are there for now, you can ask, or else we can wind up and then meet up tomorrow